Hey guys, welcome back to my kitchen. It's kind of a cold, gloomy spring day, so I figured I would bring you guys in and just share with you guys everything I use for preserving food. This may not be the time of year you've really given this a thought, but when you are in the thick of summer and you have a ton of harvest, that's not really the time of year to think about preserving food. You kind of want to have a game plan before that. So one of the first things I have on this list is something I put off, and it's something you will hear a lot in most people's canning videos, but honestly, I wish I would have just bought this book sooner. It's Ball's Home Preserving Book. I did not think I would really see myself using this book a lot, but honestly, it comes in handy and it's a really good reference. It even gives you instructions to kind of like freeball your own recipes and give you the safety assurance that what you did was good. So I really enjoyed this book, and if you're a beginner, I highly suggest it. Don't put it off. I ended up buying it in the long run, and honestly, you'll hear every single person talk about this book, and honestly, it's for a reason. So just go ahead and buy it. So next up, I actually have my dehydrator, which you can probably see right over here. So this is actually how I got started preserving. So I did not can for my very first few years of gardening. I always preserve my own basil every year. I have some cayenne pepper. I have jalapeno powder, thyme, sage, you name it. You can probably dehydrate it. You can dehydrate tomatoes, any type of fruit. Really, having a dehydrator is great. It really comes in handy. This one here is, I think, fairly cheap. I believe last year it was listed for $30, $40. My husband has had this honestly forever. It's cheap, it works well, and it lasts. I would like to get my hands on another dehydrator, especially with how many herbs I'm growing. Having a dehydrator is absolutely great, but if you don't even want to go that route, this is really handy. So this is a herb hanger, and this has has 4 different sections. Honestly, I just took handfuls of basil, handfuls of thyme, and I just stuck it in here, and I would hang this in my living room because we have a hook on the ceiling for workout equipment, and I would just let it hang there for 3 or 4 weeks depending on the item. I actually use this a lot to make smudge sticks and things like that. So last year we actually bought this just to kind of help me out with the dehydrator. I didn't want to buy a second dehydrator yet. One thing I noticed is when I dried my herbs with the herb hanger versus the dehydrator, they actually had a better, stronger flavor, and they weren't as discolored, because obviously when you're using heat, it's going to speed things up and you're going to get a little bit of like a browning effect. But honestly, when I used this, everything was still bright green, really fresh tasting. In my opinion, honestly, if you are just drying herbs and things like that, I think this is the way to go over a dehydrator. So keep that in mind. So another thing I like to use is this Mortar and Pestle. So this thing is heavy. It weighs a lot. A good quality one does make a difference. But I do find myself reaching for this more than I thought I would. I get a better grind when I use this versus my blender and my coffee grinder. Even though I use that a lot, I do find myself reaching for this a lot, and I did want to mention it. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to mention are like all the little tools I use. Honestly, I think these little toolkits are a waste of money, but you can't find a lot of these things individually. I mean, you're kind of stuck buying the kit, but either way, I'll kind of explain what I use. You get this little digital timer. The tape is still on it in the box. I have a timer on how many different other devices in my kitchen. I will say this is probably one of the most handy tools. This will help you grab the jars in hot water. Obviously, you're not going to reach your hand into hot boiling water. So this is honestly a necessary must. You need this. You need this. The other tool in here that you need, the only other one you need in this little box, is this thing here. So this will actually help with air bubbles. This is your debubbler. Also on the other end, you'll see this little magnet here. This will help you pick up the tops of lids. That way you're not touching the bottom seal and getting any type of bacteria or anything on that. So these 2 tools are the only 2 tools you need in this entire box. You also get like regular basic tongs, but I don't see why you would need these when you have these. I've never used these because honestly, so the bottom of these here is just metal. And when you have that metal and glass and water, it's very slippy. And this has the grip. So I don't see why you would need these. The other thing in here is this, which I believe is supposed to help you tighten the rings of the lids, but honestly, you're really not supposed to tighten them that tight to where you would really need something like this. So again, you really only need these two tools. The box comes with all this other stuff. It does come with these as well. So this, it will come with, I think it comes with this one here. I have two of them just because I like to have mason jar funnels. I use mason jars for everything, but a mason jar funnel is also another must. One other thing I wanted to mention when it comes to like little tools is this thing here. This is like a metal roll out rack that's like wrapped in silicone. It will actually sit on the length of my sink to where if I wash any lids or anything like that, it will just sit really nice. I know they're sanitized. Or my secondary use for this is when I am pulling jars out of the hot water and they need a place to rest and just cool off. I have butcher block counters, and obviously I'm not going to sit a hot jar on wood. It would just really, really dry it out. So this honestly in my house is a must, and I wanted to mention it. All right, so now these are a few things I wanted to lightly mention before I jumped into some of the bigger things. So typically when it comes to canning recipes, you will need things like citric acid. I do not use this all the time, but I do have it on hand. I have classic pectin, and then I also have a low to no sugar pectin. You need these different ones for different types of recipes when it comes to jams and jellies. Keeping extra lids on hand is also really handy if you can find them. Honestly, I won't even get into the whole spiel of trying to find jars and lids. It's supposed to be better now. I haven't really looked yet for the season because I stocked up quite a bit when I could find them over winter, but we will see. Either way, I wanted to say I typically 9 times out of 10 will grab a quart jar, whether that be a wide mouth or a regular mouth. Typically when I can, I just find myself using quarts more often. I do use pints. I do use some of the smaller ones for things like jams and jellies and things like that, but 9 times out of 10, I am using quarts. So I wanted to mention that just because, again, no one really mentions the things they use the most. So yeah. All right, so right behind me, I have my 240 quart stock pots, which I do find too necessary. Why? Because if you are making a recipe in one, you have the other. Like I use both of these at the same time when it comes to all of my tomato processing. I've also used both of them when it comes, well, I've actually used them in different scenarios when it comes to like making chicken soup and then also warming up the jars before pressure canning and things like that. So I definitely think having two big good quality stock pots on hand is very necessary. So in both of these pots, I actually have a secondary rack. You have to have these when you process because you don't want your jars to be sitting on the bottom of the pot. This one here has a little bit of rusting, but honestly, that's not really a big issue. The other one in there is kind of connected in a way I can't take it out. But honestly, just know that you will want some type of rack. I will link this one below. Honestly, the rest isn't an issue, but I couldn't find a different one that fit this pot in particular. But really, that's all you need to do any type of water bath canning. When it comes to your tomato processing, anything acidic, like jams and jellies, fruit spreads, anything that's really sugary, water bath canning is the route you would use something like this. If you're wanting to process any type of meat or any type of non-acidic vegetable without vinegar, you will want to pressure can, and that is right down here. So when it comes to me storing my pressure canner, I keep it in the box. You really don't want to have it out. You don't want to bang it up against anything. If for any reason it would get like a ding and it wouldn't seal correctly, you could have issues and it could become very dangerous. So when it came to diving into pressure canning, honestly, it made me a little nervous, but it really wasn't half bad. And I'm really excited to dive even deeper into that this year. So I have an all-American pressure canner. This is a pretty pricey item, and last year, very, 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 very hard to get. Me and my husband honestly started to look into this thing back in April, May of last year, and I could not get my hands on mine until about end of September. And by that point, everything I really wanted to pressure can was already out of my garden. So either way, if you're wanting to do any type of pressure canning, I would advise you to look into this little item probably sooner than later. Again, this thing took a huge price increase from when I last saw. We bought ours, I think, for right around $400, maybe $450. I could be slightly wrong on that. But last time I saw one of these for sale, I think was back in December, and it was right around $750 or something like that, which honestly is kind of obnoxious, to be completely honest. This pressure canner here can pressure can 7 quarts at a time. I don't really remember how many pints it does, but you can see this is a hefty one. This is also a 40 quart. They do have smaller ones that are cheaper, but honestly, if you are taking the time and effort to pressure can something, I don't see why you wouldn't want to do it in a bigger quantity. So that's my little opinion on that. But the last thing that I have to show you guys today is one of my absolutely favorite items I've invested in. So this is my tomato press. If I didn't have this, I would not can tomatoes. I would not make sauce. This item is 100% necessary, at least in my opinion, if you're wanting to process tomatoes. So what this little gem does is it will actually de-seed and de-skin your tomatoes for you. It will uncore them as well, but I have noticed that if I go ahead and pre-core my tomatoes, it works just a lot smoother and a lot better, and then you're not having to, I won't even get into it. Either way, this thing is just really, really, really nice to have. This is a very luxurious one. This is an Italian one. This one was very pricey. I went ahead and, invested in one I knew could last me a complete lifetime. There are cheaper versions of this machine, but again, I see myself growing and processing tomatoes probably for life at this point, because when you have homemade tomato sauce, there is absolutely nothing like it. It's a big processing day. It's typically a day I need my husband on, and he knows it. It's typically a good 8 to 9 hour day from start to finish, but again, we find it very necessary in our lives. Again, if you've never done this before and you don't know how long it can take to just really process food, maybe start a little smaller. Honestly, I did not know how long and how much of a process a lot of this stuff was until last year, but honestly, for me, I love growing my own food and I love preserving, I love cooking. So for me, this is just something that I really wanted to dive into because I never did it, and it was kind of a secondary thing to cooking to me. But honestly, that might not be for you. I do still freeze a lot of things. I freeze a lot of my green beans. I honestly probably would never can them because I don't like the taste of canned green beans. But there are things like that. If you don't want to invest in canning and you don't know if canning's for you, start with freezing items and also start with dehydrating and things like that. That's what I did. And then once I knew my garden was going to continuously get bigger and expand, that's when I invested in items like this tomato press and also my pressure canner. Especially last year, I did a lot of investing when it comes to preserving food. It's not a cheap thing to do. There's also more expensive things out there like freeze drying, and I'm sure there's other things I'm not even thinking about. Okay, so there's one other thing I forgot to mention, and you'll see the outro in a second, but I didn't want you to be like, why does the screen look different? So either way, I picked up the camera, and there's one other item I forgot to mention. So when it comes to pressure canning, you may have noticed I have a glass top cook stovetop here, and you can't pressure can on those. So you're probably wondering, Bree, what do you use? I actually use like a gas propane cook camp stove thingy. I will post videos over the screen here of times I've used it. And honestly, this is so nice to have, even when it comes to water bath canning things. Just because if you're like me, you have a smaller house, you don't want your whole house getting really hot and humid, especially in the summer. That just creates more of an electric bill. So if you can outside or do majority of it outside, I honestly find that very handy. So again, I wanted to mention that and, well, take you back to the outro. But this is everything I use to preserve food. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did and found it informative, please give this video a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye!